Hello, my name is Alan Foom, and today I'm going to talk about how long does it take to build a nuclear power plant. So, nuclear power plant construction has a very long tail. I posted this graphic. It was created by a lady called Hannah Ritchie earlier March on LinkedIn. Just it generated a fair bit of discussion, tens of thousands of views. And some commentators asked me for a breakdown on when plants were built, who built them, and how long do they take to build, etc. So you can see it's got a very long tail. Median's about 6 years, and a very long tail, some of which are very difficult projects. So key things to note is the time quoted are for construction only, i.e. from groundbreaking to commissioning the plant by generating electricity for the grid. Doesn't include the permitting time, doesn't include the design time, and that could be as long as construction, sometimes longer, sometimes 10 years or more. So this is a chart, construction time in months. So I took the details from Wikipedia, 635 reactors in 36 countries. Fastest building time is 21 months. Longest building time for the Watts Bar reactor in Tennessee, USA was 514 months. Yep, that's a long time. The mean average was 91 months and the median was 76 months, so just over 6 years for the median, and a long tail. Okay, well, that's great, but what does this mean? So if you look at a histogram distribution, you see a very long, big fat tail. Projects that tend to go wrong. So the bins here in 10-month intervals. So there's a skew towards the low side, but quite a long tail. A log normal type distribution rather than a bell curve, which is what people tend to be more familiar with. So long build time by decades. So if you look at all, this is the mean. Median is the separation between the orange and the yellow. Green is the 10% going towards the 10 percentile from the median. Going beyond the 10 percentile, and that's going beyond to the maximum, and this is going towards the minimum. So the median line is the boundary between the yellow and the green here, and you can see the means are a little bit larger. So what you can see here, it started off really brisk in the 50s, in the 60s went up a bit, in the 70s is when you had the longest tails, in the 80s is when you had the fattest tails, and then moving towards the 90s, pure reactors contracted, but a shorter spread of time. Slightly longer time in 2000s and slightly longer time in 2010. So you can see the low cases keeps going up, and but the tails tend to get a bit thinner. There were some changes that were caused by political factors. So, for example, the collapse of the Soviet Union affected many 1980 starts, which were built in the USSR, but together with Chernobyl. 3 Mile Island affected quite a lot of starts in America, and they've only recently started building new reactors there. So politics have quite big interference with that. So we'll look at the 1950s and 60s, the era of optimism, the white heat of technology, to quote British Prime Minister at the time, Harold Wilson. Had short building time. So you can see the blue line here is the build time for the all reactors. So construction time in months and then percentile, probability distribution function. So you have 1960s in green, 1950s in orange. Again, significantly better than the overall picture. And these are histograms again with 10-month bin times. Quite a bit of a spread in the 50s, again brand new technology, but again not that many reactors, 36 plants, and 135 plants started in the 60s. Again, beginnings of a long tail, but again quite short periods of construction overall. 1970s was to some extent the heyday, so 255 plants were started in the 1970s. So this is the pie chart showing this grey area in here. 40% of the total was started in the 1970s. You can see this histogram again, skew towards the low side with a bit of a fat tail, but on average they were worse than the total. There were some instances, reasons for that. So, for example, you had the American construction halted as a result of 3 Mile Island. So a lot of delays there while the designs for the reactors were re-examined to make sure that they were fully compliant with safety. And there were also problems with the advanced gas-cooled reactor design in the United Kingdom, which caused quite a lot of delays while that was resolved. In the 1980s, again, quite a long tail. You can see the sky blue versus the dark blue for everything. And again, a histogram with a tail here. About just under 16% of all reactors, 99 plants that were eventually completed. There's still a couple of plants that were not completed, but basically where construction was abandoned or suspended for various, mainly political reasons. And a lot of that was due to the effects of the Chernobyl disaster. So particular design in the Soviet Union was no longer used, and there were significant delays to plants as a result of the breakup of the Soviet Union. Post-1990, the new era. And most of the nuclear construction now is outside OECD, so that's China, India, as well as South Korea. Some technology export by the Chinese, the Russians with a quite different PWR result, the VVER designed reactor, and Korea. But there have been significant problems, particularly with the European EPR design, Flyvbjerg in France and Olkiluoto in Finland. Flyvbjerg started in 2007, still hasn't been finished. An impact in Japan of the Fukushima disaster, which was due to a tsunami, and plant located on the shoreline, severe flooding, and the effects of that. So, in terms of some of the new designs, they tend to be better now than the overall picture. So that's in terms of decade of construction. How does it work in terms of reactor type? Now, there's several different reactor types. BWR, boiled water reactors, GCR, gas-cooled reactors. LWGCR is a Soviet design for a graphite-cooled reactor, which is what was used in Chernobyl. PWR is pressurized water reactors, which about 60% of all reactors. And PHWR, pressurized high water reactor, design mainly done in Canada with the CANDU system, but also exported, etc. So most brand new designs here are now PWRs. The other designs, boiling water reactors, still a few around being built, but in terms of the gas-cooled reactors, then the SDS technology and the LWGRs also. So build type by reactor type, bigger scale for the PWRs because there are more of them, and quite a lot of them built in America. LWGR, the Chernobyl design, relatively short construction times, so that may not be such a good thing. But the median and mean times generally tend to be pretty similar for all designs. It's just that the PWR tends to have a slightly longer tail. If you look at countries, so I've looked at countries that have more than 20 reactors. There are some countries that have 2, 3, 5, 6. They're not really a fair comparison because they were done as a single program or they were spread through time, for example, in Argentina. So let's look at the countries, the big countries. So that's Canada, China, France, Germany, India, Japan, former Soviet Union, Russia, South Korea, UK, and USA. So USA tends to have the longest tail, as does the former Soviet Union for political reasons in both cases and the effects of 3 Mile Island and Chernobyl. UK has a very fat tail to do with advanced gas-cooled reactor, but South Korea, very efficient, Japan, very efficient, India, slightly longer, but again, fewer real disasters. Germany has a bit of a tail, as does France, and Flyvbjerg is included here because it hasn't completed yet. And China has a fairly similar performance to Korea and Japan. And this is comparisons to everybody. So if you look at countries started by decade, so overall, if you look at percentages of the big countries only, and the others as well in the sky blue. So early on, Soviet Union had the first reactor, but Britain and America were leaders in the 50s, America in the 60s, 70s. But you look above 70, America's had hardly anything except 2 new reactors have been started. Post 1990, China are the big leaders, together with a little bit with Korea, and then the others. India is also there. If you look at USA and Canada, North America, USA is behind the curve, Canada is a little behind the curve. They have a slightly more complicated design with the PHWR. Haven't built anything since the 1980s, apart from 2 new reactors have been started recently. So after 3 Mile Island, effectively new permitting for reactors stopped in North America. If you look at Western Europe, so 3 main countries here, France, Germany, and the UK. UK has a tail with AGR reactors. France has kind of stopped in the 1980s, building a new reactor with Flyvbjerg, which is under construction. There's also Hinkley Point in the UK. But again, this is the features. So it was a technology of the 70s, 60s, 70s, and 80s, basically, in Western Europe. You're moving to the former Soviet Union. So this includes Russia post-1990s, which is the only country of the former Soviet Union where they've really done anything. Again, heydays in the 70s and 80s. After collapse of the Soviet Union, Chernobyl, nothing built in the 1990s, and then a revival since then. Rosatom, the Russian state atomic energy company, has also been building plants in Bangladesh, Belarus, China, Egypt, Hungary, India, Iran, and Turkey. Again, a big export thing. And in terms of overall building performance, pretty much on the curve. If you look at Japan and Korea, they have been the best performers in terms of building times. Both in Japan and Korea, way ahead of the curve without a long tail. The Japanese 70s, 80s with some of the 90s and 2000s, obviously 2010s and the current situation is impacted by Fukushima. Korea started in the 70s and 80s, 90s and 2000s, plus still an ongoing program. Koreans also built a plant in the United Arab Emirates, which has also done very well in terms of construction timing. If you look at China and India, China is ahead of a curve without much of a tail. India doesn't have a big tail, but they're a little behind the curve. Again, to some extent, a question of budgets and a question of finance. Chinese started slowly in the 1980s and have gone like anything after 1990s, 2000s. So China is hungry for energy, they're hungry for all energy. Also, they happen to be the world leaders in renewables. So they've got a big growth in the nuclear program. India, again, a little bit of halting start, bit of pioneering in the early days, then slow down and now restart. Again, India is an energy-hungry country. They're going to be building things up. And the Chinese have got a new reactor design, the Hualong 1, which they've exported elsewhere. Construction time is proportional to reactor size, which is what you'd expect, depending for PWR, BWR, and CGR. In all cases, there's a bit of a tail, so key here will be eliminating the tail. And there's an interesting book by Professor Bent Flyvbjerg, I hope he's pronounced his name correctly, professor at Oxford, a Danish man, and he's looking at different types of projects. So this is how big things get done, his book on project management. And the key thing here is that nuclear power plant construction has been pretty lousy in terms of performance. Significant cost overruns, significant timing overruns. The average NPP project has about a 60% timing overrun, as well as a 50-odd% cost overrun, but with a really long tail compared to other things such as solar, wind, thermal power plants, etc. in the energy space. The solar, wind, thermal power plants, pipelines, they tend to be modular. Now, this might change when we move to small modular reactors, but the nuclear industry has obviously for fairly obvious reasons, a big safety focus, and we need to maintain that. And also, there needs to be a focus on delivery and a focus on doing things in a cost-effective way. Now, the Koreans, the Asians, the Koreans, the Chinese, Japanese have been doing that very well. Europeans and Americans less so, so maybe we ought to learn from them. But in terms of cost and timing performance, nuclear industry really needs to do better, and we will. So please like, please subscribe, and I'll see you on the next one.